Hi everyone, welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. My name is Mahika, and on today's episode, we're joined by the incredible Celia Pool, co-founder of the period company Dame, a company dedicated to providing sustainable, accessible, and incredible products to women. I hope that you learn, I hope that you laugh, and I hope that you enjoy. Let me know what you think on the podcast Instagram at Empower Sounds, and let's get started. Amazing, Celia. Welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. Can you please tell us about the inspiration behind starting Dame and what led you to focus on sustainable period products?
Well, first of all, great to be here. Thank you so much for asking me on. I feel very happy to be on here because when I first met you, I was blown away by you and thought, wow, this girl is obviously going places. So next time I meet you, I'm on a podcast of yours. So that's pretty impressive. So Dame essentially was born out of my own frustrations and my own experience of being a woman on this planet and actually seeing that not much was really changing in the period space. So I actually started my business in the world of entrepreneurialism quite late. I was 30, which is really sort of like grandma age by comparison to lots of people. And I had just had my first baby, a daughter, and I knew I wanted to finish what I was doing, which was working in the art world, and go and do something that had a bit of purpose. I had no idea what it was going to be, but the only thing I knew under my skin was the fact that I wanted to support women and help women. And so when this subject sort of came up, I thought, wow, not much has really changed since I was a teenage girl to now I'm holding this little baby girl in my hands and thinking, we're still shoving tampons up our sleeves. We're still treating this as some kind of taboo that we don't really talk about. It's still being, at that point, taxed as a luxury item. Why the hell has not much changed in this? And so it was a topic which essentially drew me in and dragged me in. And it's one of those classic things that when you start pulling at threads, a whole mess comes out. And the more we found out, the more just realized there had to be systematic change.
Yes, that's so interesting and it's so important. And it's definitely an issue that so many women struggle with even today. So before founding Dame, if I'm correct, you co-founded Sanitary Owl, an e-commerce subscription service for menstrual products. Can you please share the story behind the creation of that and what inspired you to start there and then how that transitioned into Dame?
Sure. So that was basically the first iteration of the business. And at that time, we knew that we wanted to make a change. This is me and my co-founder, but we also realized that it was still very traditional in that space. It was still very much mother handing down to daughter the products that they were using. It hadn't really come up that there was an opportunity to create your own product. But it was very interesting because when we started in that business, after a few years, we suddenly saw social media really playing a massive part in bringing these types of conversations out into the fore. And it was only through social media, love it or hate it, that we saw that there was now an opportunity because people felt there was a safe place to ask these kind of questions and really question the types of products that they were using, coupled with the fact that we ourselves could see that there was a lot of plastic waste that was coming from these products that wasn't really being talked about, that we decided that we wanted to make a change. And rather than look for products that were out there, which we felt at that point were quite insubstantial and also weren't really being adopted in droves, we realized that there was a huge gap to create a product which people could adopt and people could actually see that could work within their 21st century lifestyle. Now, we were incredibly lucky because when we actually did launch the prototype of our product, it was pretty much within months of David Attenborough putting out Blue Planet 2 and talking about the plastic crisis, which meant that we suddenly got a lot of spotlight on us and similar companies to us who were trying to make a difference. But for me, the product was always important, but it was a lot around the discourse behind it, a lot around why we have adopted this attitude towards this bodily function, how it is holding women back, how it's treated when it's such a natural part of a woman's existence, of everyone's existence, because let's face it, without a period, none of us would be here. But yeah, it was denigrated so much that people were embarrassed, ashamed about it. And that's talking about it in a very sort of Western UK society. You know, when you go to other societies and other cultures around the world, the story is a lot worse, of where people are actually being held back from school, or not allowed in the house, or not allowed in the kitchen because they're deemed unclean. So it was a very vast topic that we wanted to jump into.
It is so vast and so disturbing, yet fascinating. And before we jump into that discourse, because that's something I really want to unpack with you, I just want to ask you, can you please tell us a bit more about your product? Because some of our listeners might not know what Dame has to offer.
Completely. So first of all, to give like a bit of background, the stats that we found out when we started looking into this subject, 100 billion period products are thrown away every year. And the majority of them are single use and non-recyclable because they've touched the body and they've touched blood. Not only that, but the synthetic products that we have been using for millennia, you know, the kind of standard stuff that you go down to your local Boots or pharmacy to buy, they look like they're cotton, but they're not cotton. They are filled with all sorts of substances to make them cheap and make them absorbent. And when you put them against very absorbent parts of your body, like the vagina, you intrinsically are creating a bit of a problem. But because we have been talked about the fact that we need to keep this subject quiet and we don't really need to talk about it, and no one needs to know that you're on your period, no one has ever really started to kind of join the dots and make the connection between any kind of vaginal issues that they're experiencing and the products that they're using on a monthly basis. So when we came into this, we thought, right, okay, there are already some amazing reusable and sustainable products out there, like organic cotton tampons and menstrual cups, but hardly anyone is using them as a percentage of the population. Why is that? And at that point, as I said, people were very loyal to the kind of products that they were using. And applicator tampons were making up a huge proportion of them in Britain. Now, the whole sort of debate versus applicator or non-applicator is very much basically which company got where in the world first. So as a population, the UK are very much a kind of applicator population. And we thought, okay, this applicator, which used to be cardboard when I was growing up, has since been sort of changed about 20 years ago to plastic. And this thing gets put inside you for 2 seconds, used, and then chucked away. Why? You know, if we're using on average about 20,000 of these items for ourselves in our lifetime, why the hell are they not reusable? So that's essentially the first product that we went after, and no one else in the world was doing it at that point. And so we set out to make the world's first reusable tampon applicator. And within that, we realized that we wanted to break down any kind of barrier to entry. So make sure that it was hygienic by putting naturally occurring sanipolymers in it to make it self-sanitizing. We wanted to make sure that it was a one size fits all, so you can use a light tampon and a super plus tampon in it, and really make it as easy to use as possible. So we launched that product, and since then have gone on to launch a whole other range, including reusable pads, so that you don't have to use those sanitary towels, which for me felt like I was wearing a plastic bag in my pants when I was a teenager. You can use things which are incredibly soft, organic cotton. They absorb like anything, and you just chuck them in the wash at the end of the day. You don't have to do anything about it with the rest of your clothes. We have gone on to do period pants, which I think lots of people are now becoming more and more familiar with, which is great. We have recently just launched our own version of the menstrual cup, which also includes the self-sanitizing properties, which means that people don't have to boil their cup in between uses, which lots of people have done with previous cups. So basically looking at creating a whole range of products to fit into a woman's life, because essentially, as we all know, every single woman is different. And not only that, each woman needs different things in her period. Like, I want different things when I'm exercising, or when I'm sleeping, or when I'm heavy, or when it's light at the end. So really making sure that people could have a full range and have choice. and have a better conversation around it.
That's so powerful. And I think it's so incredible that not only have you created different products to help different people, but also different phases of an individual cycle and different days of their period. Because like you said, a period is not just like this one blanket thing. It's a quarter of your life, you know, like if you have a period, a regular period, it means half of the month you're either in your luteal phase or in your menstrual phase, and you're bleeding and you feel bad, and it's a really big deal. So it's amazing that you've created all of these incredible products to help women. My question to you is, like you said, your product, the reusable tampon applicator, was the first of its kind. So what was that like? What was creating something that didn't exist already? Like what were the challenges of that? How did that go about? How did you bring that vision to life?
So many challenges, like you would expect, also in part because we were already running a sort of different kind of business. So we had to think really hard about the fact that we wanted to pivot into something completely new and unknown. And when you're creating a new product, trying to find out even simple things like, how does it need to be certified? What kind of regulations do you need to go? If it's a whole new product, there's not really sort of much to go on. But we basically crowdsourced various different bits. So, we would go out and find the right people who had the right knowledge, other people who'd created products, go and talk to them, do proper investigative work. We use medical engineers along the way, even though in the UK, this is not deemed a medical device. We wanted to make sure that we were checking the right boxes and really giving the customer the right kind of product, having seen how much harm it can be putting the wrong product inside a woman. We wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing. So basically all those kind of things. But yeah, it's a huge challenge. And especially, even if you're going into we were doing hardware, so going into tooling, building a tool, going into injection molding, trialing it out. Like, we thank God for 3D printing, because we were able to do lots of 3D print test runs, but at the same time, I had to test drive those. So you can imagine what it's like inserting a 3D printed tampon applicator inside you. It's not fun. I was very happy when we moved across to the main product. But it's one of those things where, you don't look up the mountain, you just look at your feet, and you do each step in front of each other. And I think we'd always been very clear that we were doing this until we felt the road had run out. And the thing was, the road never ran out. So we carried on going.
That's really powerful as well. And like you said, this was your first kind of endeavor into the business world. It can be such a daunting task. How did you kind of overcome imposter syndrome every time that there was a challenge, and kept going and making sure that your business is where it is today?
I don't think you ever really get over imposter syndrome. I think everyone has it to a degree and takes it into certain places. I think it's a really big issue for women. I think a lot of women feel imposter syndrome, and I think there's a lot of the way that we've been conditioned to grow up, which is stupid and silly, and definitely something which I try not to put on my daughter. But I think at the same time, you have to have that recognition that everything in life is like an armor, and the more challenges and adversary you face, the more resilient you become. And the more triumphs you face, the more you put that on your armor as a medal and think, right, that's something shiny for me to look at next time I'm feeling a bit wobbly. And just continue to move forward. I think, at the beginning of any endeavor, just picking up a phone is terrifying. By the end, you can be speaking to hundreds of people in an auditorium, or like going on live news, and that's not such a big deal as it was before. So it's just realizing that everything has to start somewhere. And it's about, again, just literally one foot in front of the other.
That's such a beautiful metaphor, and that's definitely something that I'm going to implement when I'm struggling. So thank you for sharing that. Coming back to imposter syndrome, I think that links perfectly to the idea of shame around menstruation. So I want to go back to that, because you said that the discourse around periods is something that interested you alongside the actual practicalities of it. So in your opinion, what are the key barriers towards achieving acceptability when it comes to menstruation, and how can society work to overcome these barriers?
I think the problem with the key barriers of menstruation is it is a very cultural thing, and it inherently isn't something that you sort of feel like celebrating anyway. You know, I've been in this business for the last sort of nearly a decade now. And, you know, still sometimes when I get my period, I'm like, oh God, I feel like rubbish. You know, it's not something where we're like, yes, let's celebrate this. I'm bleeding. Sometimes you do feel crap on it, and that's fine. I think the problem is it has really held us back in the way that we have been advertised about it in these types of countries, in the way other countries have seen it as a cultural barrier, has seen it as something dirty, the way it's not been talked about. And it's very frustrating because if you look at the road that a woman has to go on, this is the first step that she takes that deviates her away from men. Because for those first like 10 or so years of life, you are the same as your male counterpart. You know, you have to go to any school, anywhere, and watch those kids aged under 10, and they're running around like they're the same. They're literally like ragging around. Quite often the girls are outperforming the boys in most areas, but they are ragging around having it. And then as soon as we get to puberty and your period starts, there is this kind of like shame messaging or this limiting thing, because it is, again, it can feel when you're a teenager, it definitely did to me, limiting. I suddenly thought, oh God, I can't do this now, and I can't do that, and I can't do this. You know, having been a very active, sporty person, I'm like, well, how could I go and like cross the desert? Because I have to think about where I'm going to put my tampon in, and where am I going to buy my tampons, and how can I go like traveling all around the world? So that starts, and the problem is it's a ripple effect, because by the time you get to talking about fertility or having babies or postpartum care or menopause, you've already been conditioned to think that this part of your body is other or is annoying or is a very negative thing. And it flows on to that. And all of that discourse can be changed so easily. And for the generations coming up, that's talking about going into schools and teaching this from age 4. Like literally starting to talk to kids about periods, about bodies, about everything from age 4 in age appropriate language, little by little, building on that knowledge every year, and revisit it every year and teach them a little bit more each year. So by the time they hit puberty, everyone is very comfortable and cool with it. For those of us who have already gone through school and have come out the other end, there is a lot that business can be doing for people. And I'm not talking about menstrual leave or menopause leave or anything like that. I'm talking about just general women's health. There is so much of that's happening in today's world, where now that our jobs have become so central to our lives, you know, no one anymore does a 9 to 5. It's usually sort of like round the clock all the time. And if that is the case, businesses need to step up a bit more and realize they need to support their workers in that sense. And women's health is underfunded. And by being able to support people to go and have access to quality, and I mean quality specialists, to be able to go and talk about all different types of women's health issues, for companies to go and invest in, if they have, you know, CSR budgets, to go and invest in businesses and research products that are helping women's health go through, because it affects all of us. If we start with periods, which is, like I said at the beginning, you're going through later on in life where in menopause, women are dropping out of work because they just can't cope, or women aren't returning to work after having a baby. You're losing out on so much of the productive workforce as a result of that. So for those people who have come through school, and we're looking for that in business and government, but, you know, government says they do one thing and does another, business needs to start supporting more, and it can do so much. It just needs to be a little bit more creative in the way that it goes about.
100%. I agree. And I think it's so important talking about the education piece as well. Dame has been vocal about advocating for education. Could you share some of the initiatives and partnerships that it has been involved with in helping to educate young people? Because I think it's so important as well that we don't just educate young girls, but also everyone, because it's the responsibility of the men in our lives, our brothers, our dads, to help support our colleagues, our friends. Because again, this is something that not just affects women, but affects the work, the business, the workforce, society as a general.
No, completely. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, had we not had a sort of actual business to run, we would have loved to have gone around schools and just talked to schools the whole time and made sure that we were talking to boys and girls and just gone around and done big campaigns. But that, for a small business, was just unfortunately too much for us to be able to do. But we tried to do things in our own way. Like, we supported a lot of charities. Bloody Good Period is one in particular who helps refugees. And I was very lucky a few years ago to win an award from Innovate UK for Women in Innovation. And with that, we were given a £50,000 cash prize, which, again, most sensible people would have gone and spent on their businesses. But we decided that we wanted to go and do innovation camp for young women. And we wanted to take teenage girls from all different backgrounds around the UK and aged 16 to 17, and we took them to Oxford University for a week. We did a big innovation camp to show them that they could be change makers as well, to show them how to create products, market products. We had all these incredible speakers come and speak to them from different industries. And I think that's it. It's about empowering people to see that they can also make change. I mean, you were saying on this conversation before we started recording about how you had a mentor who helped you and empowered you to be able to do other things. It's all about passing that baton down. And I think the more that we can do it, the better. Ours, has been very focused on women, but I think there is a lot that needs to be done with boys right now. Definitely, with everything that's going on in society, we need to bring those wonderful little boys along with us and make sure that everyone, is cohesive in society and stop this whole partisan rubbish that's happening right now, where we're seeing lots of divisions. But I do think that education piece, unfortunately, sort of within this area of menstruation, is really vital. And, as a last thing, I always have said to people that, it was being one of the most difficult products to advertise because it's worn internally. I sometimes look at people who have do clothing companies who have their logo brands across their front. It's like, oh gosh, I wish I had that easy win, because, ours are worn internally. I could be passing sort of 100 customers on the street. I have no idea if they're my customer or not, because why? I'll never find out. And that's the problem, is because this is such an internal, personal issue. It's often difficult to drag it out onto the table, but we have to do it with the women in our life, the men in our life, because the more we normalize it, the more it's going to have a ripple effect into all sorts of other areas, into, as I said, like women's fertility, women's menopause, into sexual violence, everything. We need to start opening up these types of conversations.
I just wanted to take a minute because everything you said was so, wow, the camp sounds incredible. And it's so evident that you are so passionate and so informed about this topic. And speaking about conversations, Dame emphasizes the importance of period positive conversations. Could you share some strategies that people could adopt to have better conversations about their bodies, their periods, and their struggles with the people in their lives?
I think one of those things for those who are having periods, I think it's just be open about it. If you suddenly find you have a leak and it's on your trousers, you're like, oh God, I just got a leak on my trousers. Or if you need a tampon, rather than kind of whispering about it, just ask in a normal voice. You don't have to shout about it and wave your hands up in the air and make a big deal of it if you don't want to, but just start bringing that conversation out. If you're feeling rubbish, just say, like, I was literally just listening on the radio this morning about this woman who was talking about how she was in an interview and she started crying, and obviously all the interviewers, who apparently were men, she had to say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm quite emotional, I just usually get quite emotional on my period. And she got the job. She is still there, she is still respected. That doing things like that is really, really important, because it's creating a communication channel between not only the different sexes, but between within our sex, and again, normalizing this thing. And those are very easy steps that people can take. If you're the other side and you don't have a period and you need to find and want to find out more, just ask questions. Ask questions. It's something which we can be more inquisitive about. And the good thing is that the more inquisitive you are and the more giving you are, again, this is opening up to so many other things that we can talk about. Like with all these things, periods aren't the be all and end all, but they definitely are an important strand in the big tapestry of conversations that we need to have.
100%. And I feel like that aspect of being vulnerable about your emotions is not something that's exclusive to periods. I think that's something that people struggle with in general, because being seen, especially as a woman, being seen as emotional is seen as weakness sometimes. If you're on your period, you want to hide it almost, because you want to prove to people that you're still capable, that you're still strong, that you can still do your job, that you can still show up. But I think it's important that in our discussions we show that having your period and being a strong and capable person aren't mutually exclusive things. So that's super fascinating. Another question I have for you is about accessibility. So you talked about the fact that because it's an internal product, a lot of people, you're not sure if they're your customers. However, because period poverty and lack of access to menstrual products is an issue, how do you make sure that Dame is accessible and people can be your customers?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's always been a tricky one. Ideally, you'd love to give all this stuff out for free, but the problem is that A, it costs money to make it, and B, often when you give things out to free in the society, it's misused and just discarded, which was something we never want to do, because waste is a big issue for us. The irony is that if everyone moved across onto reusables, we wouldn't have issues with period poverty as much as we do. For someone to buy, for example, a menstrual cup, that can cost them, for a sort of branded menstrual cup, can cost them around sort of 20, 25 pounds, but you can find cheaper ones out there. And then that's it. You don't need to use anything else for, 10 years or so. So, but the problem is there is issues attached with cups in terms of people using them and knowing how to use them. And also there's cleanliness as well, and making sure that you have an area to be clean and hygienic within it. But being able to help people have more circular periods, using pants, using pads, using cups, making sure that they're not tied to this bond of having to buy and every month and do that, definitely does help. And also being able to access more charities and more initiatives that can help with this. We can have incredible government initiatives which for actually quite little money could be giving out these products or subsidizing these products or helping with these products, and making sure that a vast majority of the population who struggle with this are helped. But again, this goes back to the conversation of we need to get people comfortable with their bodies so that they can understand these issues, understand these products, understand how to use them, understand that they are incredibly beneficial for their bodies before we even move on to kind of like trying to get to them. I remember talking again about Bloody Good Period. When we used to donate, they used to say, well, look, actually, we really just want the pads, not the tampons, because the types of people and the cultures who need these products, they're not used to using tampons from a cultural perspective, which is fine. And it's totally their prerogative to do it. But we just have to think about, how we can best help people. And I think that's why, as we all know with habits, it's harder to break a habit. It's so much easier to make a habit. So all these children, these young children who are coming through, these next generation of children, we need to be teaching them in schools about these reusable alternatives. Get them on these products quickly so that they're not tied to a product which is going to cost them so much more over a lifetime and is going to be putting all sorts of toxins and things in their body. And also it's just a nicer experience. Like I said before, I used to wear a pad when I was a teenager and it felt like a plastic bag in my legs. Whereas, now as a teenager, you can wear a pair of pants and it's exactly the same as you wear for the other 3 weeks of the month. So yeah, so being basically a bit more sort of creative about how we think about this.
100%. And that's super interesting. You're talking about all the resources and charities that can help. Are there any tools or apps or websites that you recommend that can help you with period awareness, whether that's tracking your cycle or getting a better understanding towards what you can do to make it a cleaner, easier, and just like happier process for yourself?
I mean, to be honest, we talk about it a lot on our website at Dame, but at the same point, there are lots of resources out there. What I would really enjoy is for the government to pull their finger out and actually invest in some proper resources that can be put on the, Gov website, because I think with all these things, and the NHS website, with all these things in the world that we're living in right now, with so much stuff swirling around, to have credible sources where parents feel that they can go and they know that it's been approved and certified is really important. Because there is a lots of great stuff out there, but also there is a lot of rubbish out there. And that misinformation can really sort of affect the way that people are being educated into the subject.
That's really interesting. You talk about parents as well. Do you think there's anything that parents can do specifically with their children, like going forwards, to have better conversations around periods and make sure that their children, especially the young girls, don't feel stigmatized, ashamed, weak for having a period, and they know how they can manage it?
I think, again, start talking about it from a young age. When you're going as a mother into the bathroom and you've got your period, let your child come in and look and ask questions. I mean, I've had all 3 of my kids, stare between my legs and ask questions about what's going on. Let them ask questions, bring it up, make it an open subject in your house. Do that from a young age. And when I say young age, I'm talking like 2, 3, like they can start asking that. They can start finding that out. There's no great surprise or mystery about where we all came from. And yeah, just making it an open topic and realize that as they get older, that changes. It's got to be an ongoing situation, an ongoing conversation. I have a girl and 2 boys, and my eldest boy is now 9, and he's always been used to it about periods. But now I can tell he's, just because of school, he's getting a little bit more like wanting privacy and finding it kind of a bit different now about periods. And that doesn't matter, because I'm still going to talk to him about it, and I'm still going to carry on making sure that he understands how normal it is and what it is. So I think it is just talking, and it's about encouraging them to ask questions and encouraging them to talk about it with their friends as well if they want to.
That's super helpful, and I think that's really useful advice for people listening. On the flip side, I feel like some people who have already grown up and are experiencing their period might have inherited some not so fun attitudes around periods and their bodies and shame, just because, like you said, culturally as well. I know that in some cultures, wearing a tampon is seen as like impure because it's seen to be like not taking your virginity, but like, that whole aspect of it. Or you can't, like you said, you can't enter certain parts of the house, or you can't do this. Or even some places of worship don't allow you to enter during your period. So what would you say to people who are trying to kind of destigmatize and unlearn some of the things that they learned and got conditioned growing up about their periods and their bodies?
Well, I think already by listening to podcasts like this, they're pretty much on like a good track. If they've continued listening to however many minutes we're in, they're already like winning. They haven't turned off at the beginning. I think that's it. I think it's just educating yourself. Like my mum always called her period her curse. I mean, what is that going to do to you? And so I, as a consequence, called it my curse when I first had it. Like, called it my curse. I mean, it's literally just the most harmful thing that you can talk about your body in terms of. And I had to unlearn quite a lot of it. But it's like everything that we grow up with our parents, and it's not mutually exclusive to periods. We grow up adopting a lot of our parents' attitudes, and part of our growing up and moving away from our parents is learning our own opinions on things and challenging things and being adopting critical thinking. And I think if you're an exploratory person who wants to go out and find out things, don't just limit yourself to periods. Constantly question, constantly find out, constantly think that your opinion doesn't have to be the be all and end all, that your mind is open to be changed, because that's the thing. Like, there is always more stuff to learn out there. None of us are the absolute authority and know everything about everything. And with periods, I'm always delighted when there's new stuff that I can learn and find out about and understand. And I think it's one of the joys of growing up, that you realize once you've left school, the freedom to go out and discover is all yours and is not dictated by a GCSE handbook.
100%. And I think that exploration and freedom is so important. I think, again, we're very lucky that visibility around periods is something that's increasing. A lot of people start to track their periods on apps. You see it coming up on social media. I think Dame has made a big contribution to that as well. And it made history by being the first company to show a tampon string in a bus advert. Can you please share the motivation behind this groundbreaking decision and the impact it had on challenging the stigma?
So again, like I said, one of the big things for us is about challenging that sort of acceptability of the product. And nothing is more iconic than the ads that kind of go around on London red buses. And we managed to secure a space and had to provide the artwork pretty quickly, and obviously didn't know which image to pick. And then we decided upon an image which one of our customers had posted on her Instagram of her showing her tampon string coming out in a very beautiful shot. And we thought, if that's not more of an advert, nothing is, where someone is openly a customer and openly proud to do something like that and do it in such a beautiful way. And so we approached her and asked her permission, and she very kindly gave it. And so she became, I wouldn't say the face because you couldn't see her face, but the knickers of our campaign and the legs. And it was very exciting. And we were very fortunate that it stayed up for quite a few months, and went around London. And it sort of opened up conversations, and it meant that we could show that this thing, which traditionally has been seen as such a sort of unattractive sanitary item, could be seen in a more high culture way. The same advert was reproduced in Vogue magazine. So it's just, again, trying to bring that conversation out. And we realized from the very beginning of doing all this that in order to make this type of product a success, we needed to make it aspirational, because only through using that Trojan horse could we get people starting to talk about it. And we knew that the important thing was to get people to start talking about this subject and realizing that it doesn't have to be something that is hidden in the back of your bathroom cupboard, that it's something that can be out and proud.
That's really amazing. And it's awesome how just the visual in my brain of like the bus touring around London and people seeing it on the streets and also in Vogue magazine. Like you said, opening up conversations. But again, this is an industry that for many, many, many decades has had so much stigma around it. It's a part of life that has so much stigma around it. Because of this, did you face any resistance or backlash for the advert or just for the work that Dame is doing? And how do you navigate working in an industry that, again, has so much stigma around it and deals with kind of resistance and challenge and backlash?
Yeah, I mean, there always has been backlash, not only sort of within the industry, but within, in the very early days, publications. There was no way Vogue would have wanted to work with us in the very early days. Like, we got turned down from a lot of publications as a result of the types of products that we were doing. This was before Dame, when we were doing the previous business. We have had a lot of backlash from investors who mostly at sort of early stage can be the sort of typical pale male style profile of like old men who just quite simply don't get it and didn't get female founders, didn't get a lot of things. And then also the backlash against the fact that we were sort of taking on a big giant corporate who I don't think was too happy with us trying to take them on. And so therefore little things would come out of the woodwork. So I think the kind of the backlash and the pushback is always there. And quite often, that's because you're doing something right. And that's because there is resistance to change. And that means change probably needs to happen. And so you just need to be poking a bit harder. But no, that's on your sort of good days. On your bad days, you just sort of want to throw in the towel and go and hide under the duvet. But you make sure that you've got a strong support system around you in order to keep pushing you on.
That's really insightful. And do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who are also considering entering industries or sectors that have been stigmatized and marginalized, and how they can navigate the same challenges you did when combining profit and purpose?
I think, there are a myriad of different things, and obviously each industry, each thing is very specific to itself. But I think being very clear in your motivations and in your goals, if you're wanting to go and do a purposeful business, is really helpful and important, because by laying that all out at the beginning and essentially drawing the line in what you will stand for and what you won't, really helps you in decision-making processes along the way. Building up networks and support systems. And networks always sounds like, sort of, as you're starting out, quite a sort of scary thing to have to go and build your own network. But essentially just talking to people. And, the more you talk, the more opportunities and openings might happen. And you never know where it's going to lead. So just talking and talking and talking. And slowly you will find that network builds up, and that you do have a little bit more armor around you. I think there is a lot of white space out there right now for people to go and attack. I'm always like talking about the white space that's in women's health, where people have just ignored these sectors of the market, thinking that they're irrelevant or that they're immaterial. And actually, that's quite often not the case. So I think keep exploring, keep delving. Much better to go there than go after something that's big and already being monopolized by other people. And like I said, reach out. It's incredible when you start out on these journeys, just how many people are willing to give time and help and advice, or just like an ear for you to kind of rant at. So just keep sort of reaching out to people.
That's really good advice. And I think that that's going to help so many people. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your journey with Dame. It's something that now you have stepped away from. So what is next for you, and what's next for your journey, and what do you want to work towards now going forwards?
Do you know what? It's only been a few months, and it's been a really delicious few months, just taking my foot off the gas. But no, the itch is already there. And I think, like everyone, there's a million and one ideas going on in my mind. And there is a lot, like I said, that needs to be done in so many spaces around women, but not only that, around sort of sustainability and how we're going to help this planet and drag it out of the problems that we put it in. But I think I'm keeping my sort of building a hat. I'm trying to keep it in the cupboard, but it keeps working its way back onto my head. So we'll see. There's nothing planned as yet, but I can feel something's coming.
That's really exciting. I'm really excited for you. And I'm going to put all of your details in the show notes and on the website so people can stay tuned and follow along with your journey. Could you please let our listeners also know where they can find Dame? I will also put that in the show notes and on the website. But just in case, where can the listeners find out everything that we've been talking about today and find out more about you and about Dame?
Sure. So Dame is wearedame.co. And it is We Are Dame on its handles. And I'm on LinkedIn. I've also been put on Instagram, not that I've done anything about it at all. So that I think is, I can't remember whether even that's called. I think it's Celia Inc. But yes, I think definitely sort of amazing that people can come and find out about podcasts like this and listen to it. And just, I think it's always really important and really healthy for people to go and explore.
100%. And I like to end this podcast with a theme of gratitude every time. So could you please share with everyone what you are most grateful for?
Right now, with everything that's going on in the world, it's got to be freedom and family.
That's really important and really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. You are truly an empowering woman, and I can't wait to share this with the world and with the audience and see everything that you've got planned for the future.
Oh my gosh, well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know on the podcast Instagram. Please rate and review the show as it really helps. And let me know what you want to see next. Until next time, lots of love.